Welcome to Milk Market Tidbit for the April 2023 Dairy Products Report, which USDA released yesterday afternoon. And this is Dr. Lawrence Jones from Farm Institute, and I'm recording this on Tuesday morning. All right, so we got the dairy products report out yesterday, and that gives us the amount of cheese, butter, and a lot of other products that were made. And instead of spending any time on this, I just kind of want to get into kind of the bigger picture. So we did finish up the April numbers, and so cheese came in at about 1.17 billion pounds of cheese being produced. We had it at 1.18, so it came in about 98.5%, so not too bad, but down just a little bit. And so we're going to take just a closer look at the cheese production here. And so here is the actual production. So what we're looking at are these values up here as to what we'd kind of predicted, what the trend line has been, and what actually came in. So there's no doubt that it was actually down from last month just a little bit. But when we look at this, I would say that this is not a huge outlier. So again, when we stand back and look at this point and 2 years from now, we're going to say, hey, was that really out of line? Like this point here may have been just a little bit out of line, and that was during the pandemic. But I would say not. But cheese production is down probably just a little bit from where we had expected it to be. And the other thing that we always look at is how much of the milk went into cheese. And again, we assume 10 pounds of cheese per 100 pounds of milk. And so we were down, a little bit less than we would have expected. So that's saying that milk actually was diverted to something else, or again, we don't have the scenario where we have exactly the same amount of milk every month. So at the end of the day, about 61% of the milk went into cheese, where we thought it'd be more like 62%. So there's no doubt that cheese production was not as plentiful as we thought it would be, given the milk that we had. This is an interesting graph. This is the percentage of cheese that would be on the top, Italian versus American on the bottom. Those make up about 83% of the total cheese, and the American is going to have the cheddar in it. And if we look closely over here on the right, it turns out that the American cheese is now above the Italian cheese, and that's not happened very many times. One time back here in mid 2021, but Italian cheese is almost always higher than American, and that has changed here. And if we look at just cheddar, you can see where it kind of is on the high side of that trend line, and the other cheeses are pretty much right at trend line, and they only make up about 17% of the cheese. So this is a graph that I spent a lot of time on trying to interpret, and I spent most of last night thinking about it. So this is the rolling disappearance. And what this is telling us right here is that disappearance is actually higher than production. And you're going to say, Larry, that makes no sense. Why would we have a shortage of cheese right now? But that's not exactly what it's saying. It's saying that the disappearance is higher than the production. So the question is there an intentional drawdown of cold storage? In other words, we're no longer in supply demand, but we just want to get the cheese out of cold storage. And are we increasing disappearance with low prices? So what can I show you that would suggest that we've had more disappearance than we would expect? Well, it's the stocks. We've actually taken about 40 million pounds of cheese out of cold storage in the last 12 months. And so we have just significantly reduced the cold storage from what it was a year ago. And so it's confounding a lot of the different data analysis here, is that actually we have very low prices. That would suggest we have a surplus of cheese, when this is telling us maybe we don't. But in fact, I think we have just an intentional removal of cheese from cold stocks. We also got the butter numbers that came in about 194 million pounds of butter. And if we plot that out, it's very similar to where we thought the trend line would be. And if we just kind of look at these data points, it's about 104% of what we'd expected it to be. And it's actually down a little bit from last month on a per day basis. And that was interesting. But butter is definitely a little bit more production this month than we would have thought. And that's consistent with the percentage of fat used for butter that came in reasonably high when we thought it would be more like 19. It came in almost closer to 20. All right, so here are the overall conclusions, and this is the final report of the month, and it's hard to get your head around everything on this. But cheese production may have been down a little bit with more American than Italian, and I'm not going to say it was down significantly, but it was down a little bit. There's a smaller percentage of milk that went into cheese. Now, that could be the fact that we had a larger amount of milk and the same amount of milk went into cheese. Whenever looking at percentages, there's always two sides of that. Butter production was strong with seasonally high fat tests. Again, if you notice, the fat test was 4.12 when we thought it'd be like 4.08, which meant there was more fat flowing around the system here. And a higher percentage of fat was used to make butter. And so the churns were working pretty hard this last month. What does this all say about demand? I think that's a really good question. A lot of this would suggest that demand is down, but disappearance of cheese is up. And I think so right now we've got kind of a strange economic scenario where we're just trying to get rid of cheese out of cold storage. All right, we're going to finish up this week with the WASDE report here on Friday. And then we're also going to have the global dairy trade here today. It'll be announced, and the first National Dairy Sales report for June. All right, that's it for me.